It's been a while since I've done a Wellness Wednesday at the swing, so I thought I would make the trek up and have a little swing while we chat. So in this Wellness Wednesday, I want to talk about 5 things that I have done that have contributed to what I consider appetite correction. Since I was very young, I have always felt like I had a bigger appetite than I should, especially back when I was on the standard American diet and I was very addicted to sugar. I was just a bottomless pit. And obviously the sugar plays into that, but I just felt like I had more of an appetite than most of the people around me. Like up into my teenage years, I remember like anytime I was in a social situation, I'd be just so hyper aware of how much everyone else was eating and how much I was eating in relation and, trying to eat less than, what I saw other people were eating and not to be the one that was like eating the most, too much, consumed my mind too much. And the first thing, number 1 on my list of 5 is breaking the sugar addiction. And that is something that I did years and years ago when I went on the Atkins diet back when I was 19. And it was painful. At that point, I was fully addicted to sugar, and going off of it cold turkey was extremely painful. Even with buying all of the Atkins products or low carb products that were on the market at the time, and there weren't very many, and they weren't good at the time. That was back when like Atkins was having its resurgence back in the early 2000s. And so there were a few low carb products on the market, but really not a lot, and they were pretty awful. A lot of maltitol and things like that. And I would buy those kind of things. I just was going from my standard American diet, trying to replace the things that I was used to. And so that's the path I went down. And even with it not being the best, eating all those products and different things like that and still eating seed oils and things, just breaking the sugar addiction was the first piece to correcting my appetite. And as I go through this list, I want to emphasize that it is not just one of these things that made all the difference for me. It definitely has been a combination of all of them, and it's definitely been a progression. I started with the breaking the sugar addiction piece, and that was really huge, but it was not the only thing that made the difference for me. So the next thing in the progression, or my list of 5 things, is eating enough calories and eating enough protein. So when I first went on the Atkins diet, I went on the diet to lose weight. I lost weight very quickly right before my wedding. It was phenomenal. But I kind of got addicted to the weight loss, and you start getting attention after you've been overweight through high school, and then you start losing weight and you start getting attention for looking good and looking healthy. It becomes kind of addictive. And so I was chasing diets, trying to get down to what I considered would be ideal. And I definitely went on diets where I did not eat enough calories, and trying to control your appetite while not feeding yourself and nourishing yourself enough food. It's just a recipe for disaster. It's just impossible. Your body is very smart, and it has a lot of regulating mechanisms, and it will try to get you to eat. And that's what it's supposed to do. So really, there's no fixing your appetite if you are not fueling your body appropriately. And so I found as soon as I gave up those crash diets, starvation diets, my appetite regulated quite dramatically. I remember when I was in the cycle of doing the really restrictive calorie diets, I was able to eat way more than I am now. I remember being so hungry that I would finally give in. I'd say, I'm just going to have like a spoonful of peanut butter. Peanut butter is like a craving food when you're starving. And I would be like, I'm just going to have a tablespoon of peanut butter and, put it in my calories. And it would be like, I'd start and I wouldn't be able to stop. And I would, be able to eat like half a jar of peanut butter. Now, being nourished and actually not being starving all the time, I'm physically not able to eat that much. So at that point, I might have been considered a binge eater, but really the problem was that I wasn't fueling my body, and because of that, my body was trying to keep me alive. So as soon as I tasted that peanut butter that has all those fat and carbs and protein, a little bit of protein, my body was like, just eat all of it. You need this. You're gonna die if you don't eat it. And so my body was physically able to eat more. My appetite was bigger when I was not eating enough. So part 2 to this one, eating enough calories first, and then second, eating enough protein. This has been a huge, huge piece to my appetite issues. And it's something that I discovered 3 or 4 years ago when I first started experimenting with carnivore. After doing the keto diet back in like 2011, when it was really focused on super, super high fat and keeping your protein moderate, or what I would consider lower at this point. I tried that and my appetite went out of control. Just being keto, just keeping the sugar out of the diet was not enough to control my appetite. When I was trying to keep my protein down in that like 60 to 80 gram range that some people say is all that you need, my appetite just was through the roof. I could not control it. And at the time, I thought that that meant I needed carbs in my diet. Looking back now, I realize that I probably just needed to up the protein and I would have been way, way better. So for me now, I try to never go below 100 grams of protein per day. And I'm usually somewhere around 140 or 150 grams of protein. And some days if I'm hungry, because I do eat to hunger now, some days I'll even go higher than 150 grams of protein, maybe like 170, 180. So I'm somewhere in that range between 100 and 180-ish, and that is where I have found my sweet spot with protein. I feel satiated, cravings are under control, and that was just a huge, huge piece of figuring out my appetite issues. The next two kind of go together, but I did separate them because I stumbled on them separately. The first one is electrolytes, and I do have a video all about when I first started using electrolytes and just the story of, how they helped me. So I will link that up in the cards. But having my electrolytes balanced has been a really big piece in my appetite regulation. It has allowed me to go between meals a lot longer. So instead of feeling like I needed to eat very first thing in the morning, which I always was a morning eater, and I still am a morning eater, but with the electrolytes in balance, it's not quite as urgent. I don't get like the nausea or the headaches like I used to if I didn't eat right away. And then I feel like I can go between meals a lot longer. I don't need to have snacks all throughout the day. I can be really content with 2 or 3 meals a day with no problems anymore. Another thing I'll throw in here that electrolytes did was that they helped my sleep. And if you've done any research on appetite, there is a lot of evidence that interrupted sleep changes your appetite. It affects your blood sugar regulation, that affects your appetite. So when you're not sleeping well or you're getting up a lot in the night, like I was when my electrolytes were out of balance, it just goes hand in hand with appetite issues. So definitely being able to sleep through the night without having to get up to go to the bathroom has been a huge piece as well to figuring out my appetite. So like I said, this next one is very similar to the electrolytes, but it's a little bit more broad, and that is nutrient deficiencies. I was eating a really healthy diet. I had started taking electrolytes for many months. I had my electrolytes in order when I discovered that I was deficient in vitamin D, vitamin B12, and iron. And because my body didn't have all of those pieces that it needed, I think what happened was my appetite just got turned up. Because if I'm needing something that I don't have, my body is like, well, the way that we get it is to have you continue to eat. So I would not feel satisfied with, the regular amount of food that I was eating or that I should be eating in a meal because I wasn't able to get the nutrients out of that food that I needed. So ideally, you'd be able to get all of the nutrients you need from the foods that you were eating. But I was eating a very high meat, healthy diet, low carb, not eating any grains, I should have been able to get what I needed as far as nutrients, micronutrients from the food that I was eating. But for various reasons, because of my body and possibly because of the state that our food is in these days, like soil depletion and things like that, my body was not able to get everything it needed. So I always had this feeling of just not quite being satisfied. I remember I would always feel like I needed to get to that full stomach stretch feeling before I was feeling like I was ready to stop eating. But at the same time, I would get that full stomach feeling and know that I needed to stop eating, but still have this like lingering feeling of not fully being satisfied. And I think that's like the hunger hormones that I didn't have in balance because of the nutrient deficiencies. So I am still working on the iron piece of my nutrient deficiencies, and that's something I've not fully gotten figured out yet, but I have gotten my vitamin B12 and my vitamin D into a really, really good range now. And that has made a huge, huge difference in my appetite. Okay, and number 5 on the list actually also relates to this last one, and that is gut health. And it relates to the last one because your gut health can determine how well you absorb nutrients. So you can be eating the most nutrient dense foods on the planet, but if your gut is in turmoil and not balanced, and if you have SIBO or different things going on, your body may just not be able to absorb all of those nutrients that you're eating. So in an effort to figure out why my body wasn't absorbing iron well, I went down the road of diagnosing SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and I went down the road of treating SIBO. I've gotten huge benefits from treating the SIBO. I feel like my gut health is way better than it was 6 to 8 months ago before I started that. It hasn't been the thing that has completely fixed my iron issues, but my other nutrients are in such a good place that I think my gut is doing a lot better at absorbing the nutrients from my food. I did supplement with athletic greens every day for several months, and that was the only supplementation I did for vitamin D and for the vitamin B12. And then of course it has all kinds of other nutrients and probiotics and different things in there as well. So that really helped top me off as far as those other nutrients go. And now I feel like with my gut health being in a better place, I think I'm doing a better job of absorbing the nutrients from my food now. And so I don't supplement with athletic greens every day anymore. I kind of take them sporadically just to, cover my bases. But I feel like they did a great job of, getting all of those stores filled up. And now, since my body is in a healthier place, my gut is in a healthier place, I'm actually able to absorb the nutrients from the food a little better, which is like the goal. If you need a supplement, that's great, and I'm so glad that they're available. But if you're able to get the nutrition from your food alone, then that would be the ideal situation. So gut health has been huge. So the things I have done for my gut health are address the SIBO, doing some antimicrobials to try to cut down on the SIBO, which is in the small intestine. And then beyond that, I have been doing some homemade yogurts from Dr. Davis from the Super Gut book. I highly recommend that book if you are interested in gut health. I've been experimenting with several different strains of probiotics and turning them into a fermented dairy that is very much like yogurt, so I just call it yogurt. And I've just been cycling through a few different strains, trying to get all the different benefits. And I definitely think that just introducing all of those good bacteria into my gut again has been a big part of getting my gut health to where it is. And that feeds into my, like I said, nutrients being absorbed well, which feeds into my appetite being under control and my body feeling, at peace that it's getting what it needs, so that the appetite dial is not just turned to full blast all of the time like it used to be. So my appetite now versus the way it was most of my adult life, my young adult life, just vastly different. I remember watching people eat that didn't struggle with appetite and just wondering what it would be like to, eat half of your meal and realize you were full and be okay with stopping. I never understood that until now. I all of a sudden am now that person, to the point where I can even eat something sugary or something processed, and my body does not respond the way it used to. It used to be if I took one bite of something, it was like I had to dive in and finish the box or the bag or the pan or whatever it was, just like this knee-jerk reaction from my body. And I just do not have that anymore. I used to think that I was one of the people that had to be an abstainer. You've probably heard the abstainer versus moderator idea. And I thought that's just how I was. I thought I was just a person that couldn't control myself when I started taking bites of delicious sugary foods. I discovered that there was a lot more pieces at play. And now I feel like I am absolutely a moderator, like no question. And it didn't just have to do with who I am as a person. It had to do with a lot of external factors. Gut health, nutrient deficiencies, not eating enough calories, not eating enough protein, eating too much sugar. So even though I feel like now I can indulge in anything that I want to, I know that it's not good for my body to indulge in those sugary processed things often, if ever. So I don't use this as a license to just go out and start eating whatever I want just because I can. But it does feel really good to know that it's not just me. And there was something that I could do that actually changed my body to be healthier so that I didn't have to struggle with the carb addiction, or whatever it is you would want to call it. And as always, I want to remind you here at the end that I am only sharing my experience and my journey. And if you find it interesting or helpful, that's amazing. But I'm never trying to give any kind of advice or say that my experience is the same as anybody else's. And I don't want to diminish anyone's experience that has dealt with food addiction or carb addiction or anything like that. And I would never say that following these 5 things that helped me is going to cure anyone else. This is simply the things that I did and that have really helped me. So that's it for my Wellness Wednesday today. I hope you guys are doing great. Let's chat down in the comments, and I will just see you again in the next video. Come on, Bub. Let's go.